On this week's video version of our podcast, Trail Cam Radio, we're sitting down with Clint Campbell, the host of the Truth from the Stand podcast. We cover a term he has recently coined called the Whitetail Slam, and what that is basically shooting a solid whitetail in every major whitetail state, and Clint's kind of plan to tackle that. And also we talk about his last year's out-of-state Iowa hunt and how that unfolded, and also just a lot of general whitetail talk, so we hope you guys enjoy it. If you want to help us out and you do enjoy this podcast, this video version of it, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and let's get into the podcast.
Lights, camera,
follow the trail.
ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
Camera!
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got 30 bucks in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
Trail Cam Radio from the guys at Exodus.
All right, we are live. It is Friday evening of the Great American Outdoor Show. This is the second Friday evening for us because you rolled into town last Friday, helped us at the booth for the weekend. You come back to help us again for weekend number 2, and we had to get a podcast in the book, so thanks for stopping by again, Clint.
Yeah, well, thanks for putting up with me and giving me a place to squat, man. I mean, this is like the one time of the year outside of like if I make it to ATA or not that I get to see you guys. I mean, I see this knucklehead once in a while, when we go hunt or scout or whatever, but like, you know, being in Illinois, it's like I never see you except like for these. I mean, we text and talk around them, but face-to-face happens really only during show season for you and I. So I really do this for our relationship, Jake.
Oh, perfect. I appreciate it. You know, 2 weekends in a row.
That's right, man. My wife's like, hey, you're spending a lot of time, like, you know, with a bunch of dudes at a house, like, on the weekends as opposed to staying with me. I don't know what this says about our marriage.
It's true whitetail love right here.
That's right. It's, the whitetail cribs love.
For real. So I guess before getting into things too far, Clint, it's been a while since we, like, long overdue. Should have been on the podcast probably prior, but we just didn't make it happen. Yeah. And here we are, and we're looking forward to it. I was talking to you, I guess, a couple weeks ago, and we kind of recapped your Iowa hunt, and you drew that coveted Iowa tag, and you got it done on public land. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was. I'm not going to say I wasn't a little bit apprehensive about it. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, you wait so long, you put points in, and you really do daydream about it as a whitetail hunter about, you know, going out and doing that, right? And I think one of the biggest things is, you know, not having delusions of grandeur that, you know, the old wives' tale of there being a 180-inch deer around every tree when you make it out there, you know, and you know, the one thing I didn't want to do was botch the experience by having my expectations out of whack with what I could feasibly pull off. Now, there's big deer out there, no doubt, you know, and you see a lot more of them, you know, out there than you do in most places. But I didn't want to pass up a deer that would be a good deer, especially on public land, you know, a place I don't have really any familiarity with, especially the piece I was hunting on. It wasn't an area that I had even scouted when I went out in March or shed hunted when I went out in March. I went out with Utah for like, I guess it was 3 days. We got the shed hunt, and you know, he showed me around that piece of public, you know, some of the areas that he's shed hunted and has hunted in the past. And where I ended up hunting most of the time was just not, you know, anywhere close to those places. And so with that, I wasn't, you know, holding out for a 170-inch deer or whatever. It was really, you know, whatever happened to get me excited, I was going to let an arrow go. And it ended up being kind of a crazy trip because there was
I remember being in Illinois watching this unfold. I'm like, what in the hell is going on out
there? There were days I wish I was in Illinois watching someone else's unfold. Like, but I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better hunt, you know what I mean, as far as like having like the full experience and stuff like that. And I've said it before, I think whenever Chad and I did, you know, he and I did a Q&A session with some of the listeners of the Truth podcast. And, you know, we talked a little bit about it. And for me, this hunt was really probably a watershed moment as far as like really hunting the way I want to hunt. Because I think it's hard whenever you're just doing, you know, when you're a working, you know, guy or girl, like folks out there that are listening, it's, you know, most of us get to do weekends and then we maybe take some vacation time and take a trip or whatever. But even when we take those trips, maybe it's 3 days, 4 days, a long weekend, depending on how far you want to travel or whatever. So you're really never getting into that like hunting immersive kind of mindset where that's all you're going to do for 2 weeks, you know. And I was solo, so it wasn't like I was going home at night to a cabin and talking to people. It was just like thinking about whitetails and hunting 24/7 for 15 days straight. And so it really gave me a lot of opportunity to try new things and make some mistakes, and so that was it was a watershed moment because I was able to hunt really the way I've always wanted to hunt. I was able to kind of have it come to fruition. And now I kind of understand better how to do it in micro instances as opposed to like in those, macro, long-term, seasonal kind of plays. Now I think I'm better suited to take those 2-3 day opportunities that you get and apply that kind of style of aggressive, mobile hunting where, I'm freelancing a lot. Like there's a lot of places I set up in that I had no prior knowledge of other than walking in, reading the sign, finding the right place, and then just reading what the woods was telling me and making some gut decisions. And that was kind of the approach.
Did it take you 5 or 4 points to draw?
It was I purchased 3 points. This year would have been my 4th, so I bought the tag, which technically was my 4th point, so it was 4 points.
Nice.
Yeah, so it wasn't. I know some folks, I think it was I forget who was telling me. I think Andy May was, I think it was his 4th year, and he thought for sure he was going to draw and ended up not drawing.
Keep hearing that more and more.
Yeah. So, and I was in zone 6, so it's a coveted. I mean, all of Iowa's kind of coveted, but that's one of the most
3,
coveted
5,
zones.
6.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was good, man. I know you had a good season.
Yeah.
As always, like Jake always pulls
He's a
through.
killer. He's a killer of. Well, somebody got to kill something here at Exodus.
Right.
Usually we rely on Jake.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's. I wish it never meets my expectations, and maybe that's just part of me. But I killed probably my oldest deer to date. Sent out its teeth. I think it's gonna be 8 or 9 years old, and it was probably mid 160s, low 160s last year.
Wow.
There was 2 big deer on this particular parcel. One was a 189-inch clean 7x7,
Man.
and this was the second biggest deer, so I just named him the number 2 buck. And I think he got bullied even last year. I had videos of him coming into scrapes with his tail tucked. And I guess going back even further in September, when I got permission for this parcel, I found a scrape open in September, put a camera over it, and then I got this deer in velvet multiple times. And then rolling through the season, never having an encounter or see him. I think the last picture I got him was like November 15th, chasing a doe, and then he came back late season. And then rolling into this year, never saw him. I thought I got a picture of him in velvet, like maybe 3 or 4 inches on the main beams on both sides with brow tines going up. I don't think it was him after killing him and being able to look at it. And then saw him in the field mid-October, did not put 2 and 2 together. It was probably 3/4 to a mile away from where I ended up killing him. And I was like, man, that's an old-looking deer. Looks like he's got like a Crowfoot G2 coming off the right side. And then it wasn't probably like 6-7 days later, I got a video of him all hobbled up, hunched up, looking like hell.
Really?
And then I guess there was I don't know, probably 150-inch 9-pointer that was on video right after he was all hunched up and just looked awful. And I had multiple videos of them together, and the one 9-pointer always looked like it bullied this buck. So long story short, set up there, and on the second sit in that area of November 3rd, wind cutting across a cliff, and saw him open up another scrape, and pulled out the old extinguisher, which is an ongoing joke here at Exodus. I pulled out the extinguisher, tried extinguishing him,
Right.
and he went away. Looked like he was, still searching. Then he came back like 10 minutes later, worked the scrape again. I let out the extinguisher again. He, heads north once again, the opposite direction. Mind you, my wind at that time, I'm maybe about a quarter of the way down this hill, and my thermals, I'm hoping, are shooting up over him yet, or maybe clipping over the cliff. And then it went over to where there was 100% going over the cliff from what I could tell. And so then hit the extinguisher second time. He heads north, disappears, and I'm like, wow, it was just awesome seeing that deer. I've been hunting him for 2 years now. And
Was that the first time you saw him?
yeah,
on the
first
hoof?
time I ever saw him on the hoof. And I was like, I remember texting my girlfriend, like, it was just, honestly, I was amped just to see the deer. I said, if he comes by, I'm still shooting him, but I was actually just really excited to see him. I was like, he looks like hell now,
Right.
in person too. And it wasn't probably another 10 or 15 minutes. I'm still looking, and I'm sitting down with my bow in my hand still, just like waiting for something to happen. And I just see his front right hoof on like just a bunch of hedge trees that fallen over and stuff.
Right.
And I was like, oh shit, like that's him.
Right.
And he, worked right through, and I was hunting in a really thick area. I did not trim any lanes. I had one tiny little narrow spot, and I ranged it. He stepped right in there, and I shot him and put a marginal shot, but ended up recovering him the next morning. And I was pretty excited. I mean, even the saga of the recovery, and we talk about it. We've interviewed people, and we've talked about it as well, of putting a marginal shot on a deer and recovering it is always just kind of a crappy feeling. But found him the next morning, kind of in the area I thought he would go. I never found my arrow or blood. And I guess if you want to hear the full long version, it's on, I don't know, one of our episodes. Ended up finding him, and just an old gnarly deer, big old knotted up right, I guess, knee for a deer, and then his back left hip's all busted. So it was cool to put an end to the story and put a tag there, but there's still other deer I wanted to kill that I didn't.
Now, did you ever find any of his sheds previously?
No, I got access to that on that farm two Septembers ago.
Okay.
So, it's kind of cool, actually, I guess, rolling back into that. After I killed that deer, I waited maybe like 3 or 4 weeks, and then I texted the guy that hunts to the south of me even further, and I said, hey, I killed this deer. And he's like, oh, that's a nice deer. And then I waited. Like, it was kind of like radio silence, and then 2 days later, he sent me a picture of that deer in 2015 in a bean field where I saw him, and he was, a really solid buck then too. So it was kind of cool to see that deer's evaded hunters for a very long time, and I would be lying if I said I didn't wish he was still 160. But still, nonetheless, I mean, it was a mature deer that, I killed him on his, I guess, rut pattern, because that scrape that opened up, that I saw opened up in September 2 years ago, that was not open until the very beginning part of November. I had a camera over there, not over that scrape, but he was in there 2 days before I killed him. And so, all these scrapes were opening up as he came back onto that farm. So I found that really interesting.
Right, yeah, that's because that would be typically, I mean, you would think that scrape would open up the same time every year then, right? If it's the same deer's around.
You would think, but the flip side of that is that 189-inch deer got killed. And I had both of those.
Oh, so you knew that got killed?
Yeah, so that got killed last year. And then so I had both of those deer hit that scrape. Last year, the deer I killed hit that at the very end of October, like 26th, 27th. And then that 189 came and hit the scrape the next night. So I think it was a scenario where he was further north on the farm. This deer was on the south part of the farm. And it's just overlap. So then the fact that that deer was gone and maybe that competition wasn't as fierce, that he didn't have to patrol the area or, scent check it as often.
Or maybe that bigger one was the one kind of laying down the sign, that's pissing in that dude's Wheaties, firing him up maybe.
Well, I think he opened that up originally because I didn't get that 189 until late October.
Okay.
And then so I think that this was more of his core area per se. But then I was talking to that guy, and he's like, "Man, I haven't walked that part of the farm in 5 years because it's too hard to get to." And that's where I saw that deer come out and feed. A couple weeks before I killed him. So I think he just found a little piece. And the hunting pressure in this area, I would say, is pretty fierce. It's not like Eastern PA, but where I'm at, there's a lot of, I guess, gun pressure. And so
when you say it's not like Eastern PA, you're not getting shot at by duck hunters? Is that fair to say?
There's duck hunters, but I'm not getting shot at, no.
That was my move. But speaking of 189 big deer, man, it's this guy here in hard places to hunt.
Yeah, hard places to hunt, hard places to kill deer, but I think I've shared the story so much that probably everybody listening has probably heard it. So
Well, you and I are getting down there soon to get after it.
A couple weeks, dude. I'm excited to get down there.
I'm pumped about it.
Check some of those cameras. Hopefully, figure out where the hell that deer goes in November.
And we want to make some trips in October though too, right? That's like the game plan.
The deer is killable in October. Yes, the deer is killable in October. Probably. Well, I guess there was in 17, I think. In 2017, that deer was actually on camera from, the entire month of November, from like the 4th all the way to December 4th. But then in 18, that camera was actually dead because it was down there unchecked for 18 months or whatnot. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on there in 18, but the deer is killable for sure in October.
Yeah, I'm already looking forward to taking some of those trips in October because the last time I went down was with you, of course, and it was.
Was that 17?
I get my years.
I get my years mixed up. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was 17.
It had to be 18.
No, it was
last season was 19.
We hunted.
Oh, you guys hunted a different area.
I hunted Clint's spot in
18. Yeah. It was 17 because that was the same year I went to Montana because it's like I just got back, which was perfect because I was in good shape from Montana to go to hunt this spot, which is gnarly for whitetail hunting.
That's funny when a whitetail hunter is saying, "Well, I got back from Montana. I'm glad I was in good shape to go deer hunting."
Well, yeah. Well, it was just one of those things where that area. I mean, it's just as thick as it is. Like, it's not that you. It's just you have to take the long way around to get anywhere for access. Like, there's no easy access anywhere. So anytime you're walking in, it's like you're taking like the around the world loop to get into where you're trying to get to. And like, you're inevitably going to hit some type of clear cut along the way, especially if Chad knows better where like those obstacles are at. I do not. You know what I mean? So whenever I'm walking into an area, I'm looking on, my phone to see how I'm going to get in. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go this way. Well, I get 3/4 of a mile in, and all of a sudden I'm up against a clear cut that I didn't know that was there. So now I'm like, okay, well, and how do I get around this? Or do I bushwhack through? Like, you know what I mean? So like the first day we hunted there, where I was trying to set up was only, I think I mapped, and it was less than a mile. It was only like 6/10 or 7/10.
I was going to say half a mile, 3/4 of a mile.
Yeah. And it took me an hour and a half.
He tried going up this drainage with all these deadfalls.
Yeah, and it was just like there was a path. Like, I remembered from scouting, like there was a small path you could get on. Like, when I say a path, it was like an old like deer trail, or it was like a trail that like people were using to run dogs in, like to hunt, rabbits in this like area. Because like the area that where you access, you had to walk in through like this clear cut with like a bunch of this like just crap that they bulldozed into this drainage or whatever, and like to clear the log landing or whatever. And so you have to climb over logs to get down, and that wasn't a problem. It was like, but then you had to find this little narrow path to walk into, like to get into the timber or whatever. And if you're 3 feet to either side, I mean, you're walking through like multiflora rows and just gnarly crap that's over your head. And I got stuck in that. I fell down. I didn't even hit the ground when I fell down. Like, all this stuff like held me up.
Spiderwebbed you.
Yeah, and so it's like I ended up having to make my way through that. Yeah. And then when I got to the other side, I realized I was literally only like 4 feet off the path to the left, Jeez. And it took me an hour and a half to get through there.
But at that time, we were carrying, like we were each carrying climbers or stands and sticks, camera gear. Like, we were carrying all this stuff in it. That's something that I found last year, just using the saddle 100%. There. It is a little easier.
Well, that was the biggest thing for me in Iowa whenever I was saying that I was able to actually hunt the way I really wanted to hunt this year while I was there. It was a couple things. It was not just hunting the way I wanted to hunt strategically, but it was also hunting the way I wanted to hunt, like from a gear standpoint, that was allowing me to be as mobile as I was being, right? Because I moved and hunt exclusively out of a saddle. I modded my sticks down to 15 to 17 inches with a 5-step climbing aider. So it's like my setup weighs nothing, and so whenever I go, it's not one of those things where it's like you're in a tree and like, man, I should move, you know what I mean?
But I don't really want to.
Like, I don't want to tear all this stuff down and have to carry all this stuff again. Like, as driven as you are, it's like that. Those thoughts do come in, especially whenever you're grinding for like 7, 8, 9. You're into that like later part of the hunt. You're just like, do I really want it that bad? And so when you're that light, it's just like, it's a no-brainer, you know what I mean? Because it's literally, it takes me like no time to get in and out of the tree, and I'm able to kind of get down and move, and I'm able to get onto the next piece and onto the next set of sign, So, I mean, I think I'm looking forward to hunting this place again with that now in my back pocket, and with the confidence of like having had that freelance style hunting and being successful at it, because now it's like I feel like I'm just more confident and able to kind of make those changes in real time, as opposed to setting a plan for each day and just working that plan. It's like the plan is almost minute to minute, like, because I have no problem now getting out of a tree if I set up and I'm like, I should see movement by 9:30, 10 o'clock. If I don't see anything at like by 10, I'm looking on my phone and figuring out where I'm going next, and then 10:30 my stuff's come out of the tree and I'm moving, and I'm going to find an evening setup, so I'm really looking forward to hunting that piece now with that kind of like perspective, because I think that that's really what it takes there, because you'll sit for days and not see deer, in a funnel or in a pinch point somewhere or whatever. It's like, you got to be willing to move, bump deer, and find where they're at, and then set up on where they're spending time, because otherwise you're going to wait a long time.
Yep. 100%. There's two ways to do it. The way you just described, or somebody who has a whole lot of time on their hands and is super patient and is
And I've done that.
Mentally tough as hell. Yeah.
It's like, because you used to make fun of me. You're like, I've
I
never
know.
seen someone who can just go sit somewhere and, like, not move. And he's like, I don't know how you do it, because I would just do dark to dark sits in a spot day after day after day.
Yeah.
Damn.
But I can't do it anymore for whatever reason. It's like I would rather bump deer, know where they're at, and be able to make a play.
Almost like FOMO, like the fear of missing out of what else is going on in other places.
Sometimes it'll bite you too. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
Well, that's
you know,
that's part of it. It's like I had a guy stop by the booth today, and he was asking me all these questions about hunting deer that he called nocturnal, or he was getting nighttime pictures of. And it's like, you know, he kept referencing Dan, but he didn't know like how much was too much, or when he was going to screw something up. I'm like, dude, you should
just do
like
it.
go do it and mess up. Like, that's the only way you're going to learn, is to go out and make those mistakes and realize, okay, that's too far. I'm too far away, or I'm too close, and I screwed the hunt up.
Yeah.
Like, you got to go do it, and that's the only way to learn.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like, I'm starting to change and having a different view on, like, postseason scouting, even with, like, the way I've kind of was able to hunt this year, and it's changed how I think I'm going to approach postseason scouting. Because before, it's like I would really go in and, like, be meticulous and, like, try to, like, not grid search, but, like, I mean, really cover a piece really, really well, right? And I'm more and more just mainly interested in, like, going during the time of the day where deer should be bedded, and then trying to literally kick up deer while I'm scouting, and then be able to know, all right, this is where they're bedding. Now, that could change whenever October, November comes around and stuff like that, right? But it gives you like a starting point, right? That way you're starting from a position of, like, I know that there had been deer here in the past. And that way, if you do have cameras out and you are getting dark deered on your cameras or whatever, you know where the first logical stage of bedding is to kind of go check. And so you should then know how far you can push that envelope, right? So you'll know bedding's in this general area, and this is about 75 yards off. So this might be like the zone in which I want to play. You have to kind of validate that a little bit with some in-season scouting to see where signs being laid down and stuff like that. But that would be maybe one way I would kind of tackle that, would be to kind of use the postseason for that. Because I feel like I've wasted a lot of time in the past postseason scouting the wrong way, where it's just, you know, I think the in-season time is much better spent than it is postseason.
I would totally agree with that. I think for a lot of guys, it's hard to go into the woods, and myself included, to go in the woods and you see all this sign that's laid down. You know, there's no foliage on the trees anywhere. It's very easy to see very long ways, whether that's tracks, rubs, scrapes, whatever. The entire woods is opened up, but it's still sometimes hard to relate that sign to what time of the year it was actually laid down on.
100%.
I mean, it was happened a month ago, or 2 months ago, or 3 months ago, or 4 months ago. Like, how do you decipher, you know, when that was actually made and what part of the season? That's there's not very many guys that do that well.
Right. I mean, because I think, you know, even with scrapes, like, people are like, well, that's, you know, of course, like, you know, October into, like, November sign, or like mid-October into, like, November sign, right, or whatever. But, like, deer will lay down sign, like, throughout the year. You know what I mean? So it's not like – it's more rare, right? It's probably – there's probably fewer, you know, scrapes during whatever time of the year outside of, like, you know, pre-rut and rut. But they still have to communicate during the course of the year. Like, they don't just stop communicating altogether with one another. It's just a little bit more sparse, so you don't see it as often, right? I know when I went out in late seasons, like, I was still finding rubs, like, with shavings on the ground and stuff. So it's like, if you come along, you know, postseason and you find that rub, it's like, and you go, I'm going to hunt this in October, you know, or mid-October. You know, it's like, man, you're like 2 months too early. You know what I mean? And so it's just, you know, I think that was the biggest thing for me this year, and the way I was approaching things was, like, I was finding stuff that I knew that I could hunt that day, you know, and I knew that it was accurate. And I wasn't afraid to bump deer. I was giving them a little bit more credit for having more nerve than a lot of people probably think that they do. You know, and that was now, granted, I was in Iowa. Right, but I was still using the same approach in Pennsylvania, and I was having the best encounters I've had in years this year with the deer that I had on camera that I wanted to target. You know, and so it was the same approach. It was bump them if I have to, be aggressive, and then, you know, set up on them when I find them. You know, and that was really it. And then swapped how I changed how I used. And I can talk a little bit about that, but how I used cameras in Iowa. You know, it was kind of tied to how I was.
Yeah, touch base on that a little bit, because it's. I guess I'll just let you tackle it, not put words in your mouth.
Yeah, I mean, I think most folks, you know, if they have the opportunity to, you know, if you're hunting a piece that you're familiar with, like, you're putting cameras out and you're doing the classic kind of approach of, you know, summer you're really inventorying, right? And then once deer kind of move off those primary food sources, you're transitioning into your your scrape areas or your pinch points you're going to kind of really focus on for pre-rut and rut. And then if you're going to transition them again, I know that we've talked about in the past, leaving cameras set all year round. I like to do that if I have a piece that I'm familiar with. But in the instance of Iowa and a lot of the public that I hunt, like I typically don't hunt the same public pieces even in Pennsylvania year after year. Like I'm usually hopping to new pieces almost every year. But in the case of Iowa, it's like I really didn't have a lot of intel, on any of the pieces I was hunting, and I would scout through and find a spot to hunt. And the story goes, I missed a really nice deer. If we'll go ahead and put that out there. On like the 5th or 6th day of the hunt, I missed like a mid 140s 8-point that I set up on a primary scrape area, and he came in within an hour of me being in the tree. It was probably like 1 o'clock or so. And I was bummed out that I missed him. I ended up catching up to him like a couple of days later. Missed him again. We'll go ahead and put that out there.
Where I was like, what the hell's going on?
I know. And so it was crazy that I caught back up with him. But then what I needed to know was that at this point I was getting later in like the end of the first week, beginning of the second week of November, where you will start to see scrapes close up at that point if the the bucks in the air that are laying or that are tending those scrapes or found does and are starting to get into lockdown and stuff like that. Those things will dry up. And so what I didn't want to do is be spending time in an area where the scrapes were drying up, because I was really kind of hunting active scrapes was really what my plan was. And so what I ended up doing was I had a render, with me, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to hang this on this scrape. I was like, not that I'm trying to find that deer that I missed or even try to find a specific buck. I just want to know that there's does hitting this scrape, because if they are, then I know that there's going to be bucks in the area. And I'd already seen, missed one twice in that general area. And so then I know that area is still a good spot to kind of continue to scout, find sign. If he's still laying down sign, then it's still a place that's viable. Mm-hmm. But if I didn't see does hitting that scrape and all of a sudden things started to dry up, I knew that I probably need to kind of move off to another place until that opened up again. And so that was kind of how I was using cameras in that case. It wasn't looking for a specific deer. I was literally just looking to see if the scrape was still active. And if it could tell me that, I would literally get up every morning and check and be like, all right, a doe hit it. Oh, a buck hit it at like 4 a.m. or at 3 a.m. or whatever. I was like, okay, cool. Wasn't a shooter, but it's being tended, during the night or whatever. And so I know that other deer are going to have to come by at some point to check that. I just need to figure out where they're coming from and what other part of this parcel are they spending time on. And that was really what the boots on the ground did for me. It went and allowed me to find where those other deer were spending time.
Yeah, I would say the most powerful way to use cameras in farm country or Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, or Ohio, I really think monitoring scrapes is the most powerful way you can use your cameras, hands down. And that's from inventory, knowing when, scrape week. We have a ton of podcasts about that on Trail Cam Radio. And then even when they go dry and then when does come back and hit them, and then a day or two later, a very mature buck is going to hit that. And a lot of times in my experience, it's been in daylight. And then even rolling into Thanksgiving time frame in those community scrapes, I have a lot of big bucks hitting them at that time. I don't know. I live and die by scrapes pretty much year round, whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah. I used to not, and it was really more because I wasn't. I think for the longest time I wasn't looking for the right ones, right? And that was something I had to kind of learn, a painful lesson, which was like hunting the wrong scrapes. And it was really a lot of talking with, guys like John Eberhardt and, Dan Enfault and stuff like that. And I know we all know those guys, and just really listening to them and then having some outside the podcast conversations with them about it and stuff like that, to where it really finally sunk in. Because in Pennsylvania, I had literally zero success for the longest time hunting scrapes. But what I realized was that I just wasn't prioritizing the ones that were either in close to side cover, right, or the ones that you would find that is close, in and near and around bedding cover.
Absolutely.
And those are like the money spots, right? And that was kind of what I was focusing on in Iowa, because, before I found that primary scrape area that I ended up missing that big deer, I probably passed 12 scrapes. Like as a Pennsylvania hunter, you know how hard it was for me to walk by 12 scrapes that were all fresh, like they'd all been tended within the last probably like day and a half, right? But I knew that wasn't the right spot, because you have to kind of qualify the sign based on where you're at. Like all sign is not created equal, right? That sign in PA, like those 12 scrapes, probably would have meant something different to me than they did in Iowa, right? And so I kind of walked by them knowing that, like, man, there's got to be something even better, right? And that's just basically what I stumbled onto was like 6 scrapes all within about a 10-yard area with a rub, which I really like whenever I find a rub with the scrape. Like, to me, that's like spidey senses go off. And I sent you a picture of that rub. It was like neck high. And I was like, okay. It was like all these scrapes in a rub that's neck high. Like, that wasn't a small deer that made that sign. I was like, so that was, exactly why I set up in that spot. But
when you're talking about scrapes in relation to some type of security cover, what is the approximate distance? Is that like on the edge? Is that scrape on the edge of that security cover, or is that 40 yards away from that security cover? When is it close enough?
I mean, for me, I prefer it to be right up in the business. You know what I mean? Like, I'm similar to you where it's like I don't mind hunting thick stuff where I can only see maybe 15, 20 yards.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, like, to me, that's what I want, and that where I ended up killing that deer in Iowa, that was kind of what I had. Like, the scrape, like Eberhard will want to hunt to where he can actually shoot to the scrape. I like that sometimes if I'm right up against security cover, like literally where he can take 2 steps and be gone, like I will set up to hunt and shoot toward a scrape, and that's kind of how I hunted some of the scrapes in Pennsylvania. In Iowa, what I was kind of recognizing was I had some really good setups, but I guess maybe I wasn't familiar enough with the terrain and wasn't playing the terrain right, because I got the one time the deer that I missed twice, when he finally busted me, he caught a little bit of a thermal pull up the side of this little up the edge of this draw, and that was kind of what ended the game for me with that particular deer. And so what I ended up doing in that case was I actually backed off the scrape and actually moved back into the timber like 100 yards off that scrape. Now, I also had some other data because I did some scouting. I found 2 of his beds. I found one of the rubs, I found some rubs and a scrape that was actually in the timber, and I kicked him out of a bed on my way through there. And so I knew how he was kind of working that little terrain feature there to get into that area to check those scrapes. And so I caught him on his way, basically. Right. I doe bleeded him in and then I gave him a tending grunt, and that brought him in because he was checking those scrapes.
So you use the scrape as your like A to B, like bedding to scrape, you cut them off in the middle.
In that case, yeah, because they had the upper hand on me because of the terrain, right? And that was what I figured out after I hunted that general area like 3 different hunts. I figured out that I needed to get off where the scrapes were at, and I needed to get further back into the timber. And once I got back in there, I needed to set up to where that draw, it was all bare. Like, so as I'm sitting here, I had a triple trunk tree that I was in, and there was a draw that was down here to my right side, and it was all open. So if a deer wanted to approach me from behind, or try to get downwind of me, he was going to have to expose himself in that draw, which I knew they wouldn't want to do, right? And so I set up that way purposefully to give me a barrier. That way everything would have to come this way toward me, right? And that was kind of how I set up, because where I kicked him out of, he was really just, to my 11 o'clock is where I bumped him from. And that scrape was directly at 12 o'clock, maybe 150 yards away from me. And then the other weird thing, and you'll know this just from hunting big woods, is that you don't always get like a big goat path like you do maybe in like dedicated like ag country or whatever where deer are moving. Like, it was literally just like an indentation of like leaves that you could just slightly tell that animals had kind of gone through that area. And I had seen that, and the reason I was able to recognize that was because when I missed that deer the first time, I didn't notice there was a little trail off another scrape that was a little further down in front of me. And I didn't see it because it wasn't obvious enough. And whenever he hit that scrape, he walked into that trail. Yep. And I was expecting him to come further up to tend those other scrapes. Yep. And so once I recognized that, because I was like, after I missed him, I was like, what made him walk off like this scrape line? Like, why did he dip down into this draw? And it was literally because like there was just a little indentation that I couldn't see it until I got there. And so when I saw that, whenever I was scouting that next spot, I was like, this is how they're coming through. I was like, this is definitely how he's going to walk through here. So I set up to have a shot toward that. And sure enough, I put it on an Instagram post. I don't know if you saw that one, but I drew an arrow. It said, want buck here. And that's exactly where I shot that deer, is where I drew that arrow.
Gotta love when that happens.
I know, right? It's like I couldn't have planned it out any better. But to answer your question, I think it just depends on like what the setup is, and how, if I can be on a scrape and sit to hunt and shoot to a scrape, I'll definitely take that, but I definitely want it to be at least up against side cover. I don't want to get too far off of it, because I feel like then I'm going to get dark deered, or it's going to be at like very last light, and I'm going to have a marginal shot opportunity.
Right.
Good answer.
Yeah. So that was my channeling John Eberhart, you know.
Well, you're in a unique position. I mean, you've had those conversations with those types of cats for this June will be 4 years.
Yeah.
So I think they always talk about it taking a year or two for things to really start clicking.
Yeah.
And it seems like you've been pretty effective, at least getting in the money zone pretty often.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was funny. I was talking to Dan about it when he and I did a show together, and I just told him, I was like, this year was like the year that like the light bulb finally went off. I was like, it's like I didn't have to think about it anymore. It's just like, and that was what he said. He's like, the hardest part is, you know, it doesn't matter what it is, hunting or job or whatever, marriage, it doesn't matter. It's like, you know, it all takes work, you know, and most people just aren't willing to kind of go through like the learning curve and like the failures along the way in order for it to become second nature, right? Most people are like, you know, I can't hunt beds because it's too hard and I don't ever find beds. It's like, well, these guys aren't most of the time hunting a specific bed. Like they're usually hunting a general bedding area, right, in which they know deer are bedding in, right? So, yeah, if you can find the bed, then great. But like you don't need to necessarily find that bed to know that deer are bedding in there or a buck is bedding in there. And so it's just going through that process of like, you know, learning that you're going to fail along the way, and that's where you're going to kind of pick up the most valuable information. And eventually one day it's just going to click, and you're going to be like, that's how it works, you know. And it's hard to kind of describe, you know what I mean, where it just all starts to make sense and you start to see the pieces happen, and where it's like you don't have to think about the wind necessarily, and like you already know what the thermals are going to do. And I was playing that on that last hunt because that, you know, it was an evening and it was warm, and so everything was kind of pulling up over the side of that the side of that draw, and I had a wind that was basically coming from my back but was just cutting just over to my right, and I don't remember exactly which direction that would be in relationship to how I was setting up. And I was expecting the deer to come in basically from my 11 o'clock, and my wind was blowing from like toward my like 1 o'clock. But through the day it was going to shift, right? So if I had like a southwest wind, it was going to start to have a little bit more, east in it as the day was going to go. And I knew by dropping milkweed and kind of checking that I was going to be okay until like almost closing time. And when that deer came in, I mean, the wind had already switched, and I was getting that, more of that easterly wind, and I was riding the wind on a razor's edge, where it was like we're talking feet between being busted and not busted, you know what I mean? And that was the other thing too. It's like that deer came in with all the confidence in the world. Like he would have never thought in a million years I was set up where I was set up. Because he thought for sure he was bulletproof walking in there.
That was the hardest part for me, was learning to give the deer the wind, because I grew up,
it's counterintuitive. It's hard.
Well, I think for people my age in their mid-30s, like you grew up watching traditional outdoor media on TV and reading traditional magazine articles, and it's like you hear and see people talking about being in the stand with the wind in their face,
right?
And that's not conducive to killing mature animals, because they're not going to move in that manner, at least to my experience. And there's some guys that don't pay attention to the wind at all, but anybody that's doing it consistently is giving the deer the wind to their advantage. And
it makes access tricky. That was the other thing too. It's like because I was doing so much ground and pound of just like pounding the dirt every day, and however many miles I would hike until I'd find a setup. It's like I was always having to be mindful of what my wind was doing for my access too, because I was always on an access mission. You know what I mean? Because I didn't really know where I was going. I didn't have I was just talking to our buddy Zach, right? And like he said something I thought that was really kind of poignant, which was when he goes to hunt, like he goes out to hunt without a destination in mind, right? He doesn't get locked into a spot. And that makes it sometimes hard for access, right? Because you don't really know where you're going. But even like the one hunt I had, like in that CRP field where I jumped, that was the other part that I didn't mention. It's like I jumped like a legit booner while I was out there in this, draw in the middle of this CRP field. But if I would have thought about it more, I should have known that there might have been a buck bedded there. And like, so my access was great as far as like the wind was in my face, so I wasn't going to get winded. But if I walk up on a deer bedded, where do you think he's looking?
Yeah.
He's looking in my direction because he's got his 6 with the wind, and he's watching with his eyes out in front of him. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so I talked to Zach about that a little bit, and I was actually talking to Jared Scheffler about it too. And he was like, he's like, there's times whenever I'm on a stalk, is what he kind of mentioned, where I'm literally just going in, giving them the wind, until I get to a point to where I recognize what my next moves are going to be. And then I'm starting to cut the wind and play the wind and try to figure out how I can beat his nose, you know. Because you also have to take, especially when you're spotting and stalking, you have to take into consideration their eyes too. You know, well, eyes and ears at the same time. But you know, you can get away with the wind a little bit. And that's that whole idea of like they've got more nerve than you think they do. So them winding you from 300 yards away probably doesn't blow them out. But you get much closer than that, you probably need to start thinking about how you're going to start cutting the wind to make the move on them. You know, so that was the other kind of big learning curve, was that the whole access piece while I was moving. And it was just an awesome experience, man. And it was, I said it was like a master's class in whitetail hunting. You know, it was just every day studying maps, rethinking the hunt, you know, from the day and what I did right, what I did wrong, you know, and knowing that I needed to practice with my bow more, apparently.
And you practice a lot, or you
Dude.
shoot a lot, and you have Greg on the podcast talking about different setups and stuff.
I know, man. It's like I shoot probably like in season, like starting probably in, I don't know, probably like April, May. I start shooting probably like 3 to 5 days a week. You know, and then as the season hits, it's like I shoot every day during the season, like at least a couple arrows. I have a setup in my basement. I go downstairs and shoot, you know, every day after work, after, you know, the sun gets to a point that I can't see after work or whatever, or I'll shoot a couple arrows in the morning. I like doing that after I work out because it kind of mimics the idea of like having
Your heart rate jacked up. Yeah.
heart rate jacked up and having that, you know, buck fever or whatever. And yeah, I mean, it's switched to a back tension release. It's like Greg, you know, he's been on your show, and Greg is a killer and a great archer, you know, and he's kind of been my, like, you know, my sensei, if you will, with archery, you know, and we rebuilt my shot, and like I'm a good shot, supposedly.
Were you like, did you have buck fever, or was it just whiffs, or break us down?
So the first miss, I hate that I have to say the first miss, like it's was that one was a couple things. You know, I got a little shook because I didn't expect to see him that quickly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he just popped out of nowhere. I just happened to look up and I just saw dark chocolate tines coming through the timber, and I was just like, oh shit, there he is, you know. And I immediately grabbed my bow and swung my camera around, and this is like, and I threw the camera out after this. And I was trying to get him on camera. I was trying to figure out what scrape he was going to come to, and so I was trying to get him in frame, And like I said, like I didn't see that little trail that was there, and so I was expecting him. Like I was set up to shoot him at like 15 yards, like right behind me. You know what I mean? At that primary scrape area, and I had like the most beautiful opportunity once. Like if he was moving too fast in between like the last tree and that scrape, it's like I had like, I don't know, probably like 5 yards that he would have to go through that. There was not anything in between he and I that I could get a shot, you know? And that's what I was expecting him to do. And so when he started dipping into the timber, I panicked because I didn't range that. And so now I'm like trying to range it, trying to move the camera, trying to range it. Couldn't get him to range because he was behind a few like small saplings and stuff. I finally got a range, and it was 28 yards. And I pulled back, and I shoot a single pin sight with one pin, or set at 25 yards, and I just held low and let it go. In hindsight, after I thought about it, it's like I had more time with that deer than I thought I did. I didn't need to rush it, and that was just what happened. Like I got shook, I panicked, because it was one of those things like I'm in Iowa, I see this great deer, and now I'm going to screw it up, and that's exactly what happened. You know, the second one was just I hit some brush that I just didn't see, you know, and it knocked my arrow down. And it was at 28 yards too. It was the same yardage. And I had time. And then the third time I saw him, I couldn't get drawn because he was looking at me. Yep. And then he just backed off.
And that was the 3 deer, same deer 3 times?
Yeah, same deer 3 times. During the rut, which is crazy, right?
That's remarkable that you got set up on him 3 times.
Well, it's funny because I told John, like, after I licked my wounds and got over, like, because there was a moment there where I was like, man, I'm just going to go back to Pennsylvania. I was like, I'm pissed off, whatever. And then I finally, like, you know, called myself some choice words and some names and was like, you need to buck up. And I told John, I was like, I'm going to kill that deer. I was like, I'm going to find him again. And he's like, dude, he could be like 5 miles from there. It's the rut. You know, I was like, nah. I was like, as much sign it's laid down in there, I was like, he's got to still be there. Like, I can't imagine that he would leave that, you know, that area. And I saw does while I was set up too. So I knew there were does in the area that were by themselves. So I knew that there were does in the area. All his sign was there. I was like, he's got to still be there. And then, you know, 2 days later, I find him, you know, again. And then I ended up having 4 encounters with that deer. 3 days in a row, actually.
Fourth one was fatal.
Well,
or no, this is a different
It was
deer.
a different deer. Yeah, it was a different deer. I bumped the deer that I killed. I ended up bumping on that scout the last day. I bumped him out of that bedding area, and then set up on it. Tried to bump and dump. He didn't come back that night. I knew I was going to have a good wind the next day, so I came back and hunted that spot the following day in the afternoon, and he came through at like 3:30 on the last day.
Was that the 10th day of your hunt or 11th day or
15th?
15th day.
The last day.
The last hour and a half of the last day.
Gosh. Well,
See, that's
kudos
what I mean.
kudos for you for sticking through that.
Yeah, I mean,
Hammer.
Thanks.
you and I had talked on the phone a couple times, throughout the course of that 2 weeks, and it's like, I know how mentally tough you are. I know how hard you hunt. I know how physically hard that you hunt and how you get after it. There's not very many people, probably in the world. I'm not going to say not very many people that I know, because there's probably only a couple. But there's not very many whitetail hunters across the country who could put themselves in that hunt for 15 days, go through those situations, and then kill 2 hours before last light on the last day.
Yeah.
And was that your personal best?
Yeah, it was the biggest deer I've ever killed. I never even scored him. It's like I didn't even score him. I didn't have time to. It's like I was literally leaving at 4 o'clock. I literally packed. The reason I hunted the afternoon and not any earlier than that was because I packed up camp, put everything out on the porch of the cabin I was staying at, and was basically like, I'm gonna hunt. If I kill something, I'll have to figure something out. I was like, but otherwise, it's like I gotta come home, basically sleep, and then get up at 4 a.m. and start driving back to Pennsylvania. And so it was literally, I killed him. The first thing that went through my head was like, it was just, I at that point I was like a beaten inmate, where I was like, I let the arrow rip, and I was like, I missed again. You know what I mean? It's like I was expecting that I'd missed, and I thought I did for like a moment. Like I got nervous because like he jumped. Like he didn't it wasn't like the big mule kick. He just like jumped and he bounded like 20 yards and he stopped and he turned around and he looked at me. Or he looked back. He didn't look at me. He was just like looked around like, what just happened? And I was like, go down, go down, go down. And I'm like, and he wasn't wobbling or anything like that. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And then he starts walking away and he had his tail tucked like really tight, and I was like, and as he was walking away, it was like really slow. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, so he's hurt. You know what I mean? I was like, so I'm going to back out. Give him some time, let him get away from here. I'll back out and, I'll give it a couple hours before it gets dark, and I'll see where I can find good blood. And if I have good blood, maybe I'll try to go find him. If not, then I'm just going to back out and I'll have to like find him the next morning and just go home late, And I ended up getting down. I text John, a picture of the arrow. It was good blood, but it was almost like it was wiped off. It was really weird. And so John was like, and I had the same feeling too. And then I went to find blood, and I found like a little bit. I found a little bit more. But you know how it is when you're in a tree and you make a shot and you try to find a deer and you landmark something like, this is the last place I saw him. But when you hit the ground, it like looks completely different, right? It's always, right? And I know that you find a landmark. And so I followed it for like a little ways, but I thought he went to the right. And so I started bearing around like the end of this ridge looking for him, and there was no blood. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like there's no blood. And I was like, you know what, let me walk over here to the left a little bit. I was like, maybe I'm just like screwed up. And then all of a sudden I just find like puddles with like bubbles in it and stuff like that. And I looked, and he went like 40, 50 yards. You know what I mean? It was just like down over this little knoll before where I couldn't see him, and there he was. So I texted John. He helped me drag him out. It was a brutal drag. It wasn't fun. So I might have to start taking a Western pack from now on, because that was not a pleasant drag. I think I gutted him out at like 5 o'clock or something like that, and then started dragging him right away.
PM? AM?
PM.
Okay.
So it was starting to get dark, and then John was going to come over to help me, but I was like, finish your hunt, and his lease is a little ways away from where I was hunting. And I was like, finish your hunt, and then, let me know when you're in the area or whatever. And I sent him a pin. I started dragging him out, and like I got him out through like the brush, like this clearing where you could drag him on like this like old 2-track or whatever. And that took forever. And I hiked back to the truck and met John, dropped off my stuff. And it was just like, it had snowed and had froze, and then it had warmed up. So everything was just like greasy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it's like I was covered in mugs. It fell down trying to drag him. I mean, I started dragging at 5, and John and I didn't get him back to the truck until like 7:30, 7:45. Yeah. Something like that. So it was like a good, 2+ hour ordeal to get him out of the woods. So. A little over a mile, I think, in total.
Snap some photos and hit the road.
Pretty much, snapped some photos. We went to John's buddy's taxidermy shop, dropped him off, did all the paperwork. He and I went to his place, recorded a podcast about it, and then I drove and back to the cabin. I went to bed at like 1:30, got up at 4 a.m. and started driving back to PA. Ooh. Yeah, and left. The guys at, it's Old Barn is where I had the taxidermy and stuff done. Those dudes are good dudes, so like shout out to them because I didn't have time to. I like to butcher my own stuff, but I didn't have time to, so they literally butchered him and froze everything and actually shipped me all the meat back too, which was, they don't usually do that, but that was super cool of them since I was from out of state and didn't have time to do it. And he's there. I'll get him back sometime this spring or summer, mounted, and they'll ship him back to me. So
that's cool. What'd you get? What kind of form did you get?
I don't even remember. Like,
A whirlwind.
Yeah,
that works.
Like, I remember I was looking at the wall and I was like, I like that one, and they were like, all right. Yeah, so
Semi sneak left.
Yeah. I was so tired and just so beat. It was after 15 days and then trying to drag him out, but it's the one thing that was cool about it, beside like the experience and all that stuff, was there was a lot of guys like you guys and stuff like that, and other buddies we know, like Johnny Stewart and Greg and those guys. Like, I got a bunch of texts from those guys. It's like, hey man, keep grinding, grinding. Yep. You know what I mean? Keep going. That we're following along. And a couple of them said what you said, where it was like, dude, I couldn't have done what you did, or whatever. And then from guys that I have a lot of respect for, so it meant a lot, that those guys were recognizing that I was putting in the work, and I don't know, man. It's like, I don't know that I would have wanted it any other way, to be honest.
You got your money's worth out of that tag.
Damn
15
right I did.
full days.
Damn right I did.
How much? Think of how much you progressed during those 15 days. Imagine if you did shoot him on that. Nailed that deer on the first shot.
Yeah, I mean, well, I had a contingency plan. You know what I mean? It's like if that had happened, I was actually headed down with Greg and those guys, Godfrey.
Mm-hmm.
They were in Missouri, and so I was going to head down to Missouri and hunt with those guys for like the last. Because I had 2 weeks off.
Yeah.
And Missouri's an over-the-counter tag, so I was just going to pack up my stuff, jump in the truck, and head to Missouri and go hunt some public land in Missouri. But we'll do that another time. I needed all 15 on this one.
Mad respect.
Yeah, it was cool, man. So looking forward to getting after it with this fool this year.
Yeah.
In the years to come. So
I'm excited to see this year play out from afar.
You can join us, man. You can come and join in the
tried.
fun.
I try every month.
I never say a hard no. I say, yeah, all right, yeah. But like every time I talk to you, like, man, I don't know. So I never get a firm answer from you, so I can't provide one as well.
Right.
That's true. That's true.
Well, you got a firm answer now because I'm going, and I'll give you.
I'll
give you the dates.
When you no.
Yeah. Well, I think this year, didn't we talk about planning a little bit different, like going a little? Well, I know we want to try to go in October some, but didn't we talk a little bit about maybe going later in November, like the second week versus the first week? But I mean, you have trail cameras out the wazoo down there, so it's like we probably just need to listen to what the data tells us from years past. But
yeah, I don't know. I have so many conversations about that place and about that deer, and like I have so many different plans. Like I don't even.
That's what I'm saying.
Who knows? Who knows?
Right. Yeah. Well, what's your plans for this year, man?
I will be in Illinois hunting deer.
Hunting deer.
That's all I know.
Any out-of-staters?
It all depends. I mean, I always toy around that idea. I mean, we've talked about possibly doing some different hunts, but our plans change every 2 weeks. But I can guarantee you I'll be hunting in Illinois, and I'll guarantee I'm trying to try to get better every year. So that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's like the out-of-state thing is like. I love hunting out of state. Like I feel.
Can we bring up the conversation that we had? I think last weekend, the World Whitetail Slam. Clint
Campbell.
Yeah, first ever.
Oh yeah.
So I put this out on the Truth Show or whatever. I might as well screw myself here too.
Yeah.
I mean it's not a big. I'm a normal dude that has a normal job and stuff like that. And I love whitetail hunting. I'm passionate about it, and I'm not one of those guys. I'm honest, where it's like after that 2 week trip, like I was good. Like I needed a couple days. I'm not one of these guys that says I can hunt every day for 20 years straight. It's like I can't do it.
I don't know if I believe those guys fully either.
I think they're full of shit. To be honest with you. It's like you got to have some type of like human interaction. Like I literally on that trip was alone all the time, which was good. it was also bad. Like some of those days, it would have been nice to have someone. John actually tried. He would like, hey, why don't you come over? I'm like, no, I'm pissed off. Stay home myself. Yeah. So my goal is, I do all DIY, out of state. Public land hunts is the deal, and in PA I hunt public land, but I want to kill a respectable whitetail in every big buck state. So I haven't kind of whittled down exactly which states those are, but it's all the ones you would kind of think of.
Let's start. Let's work through the list. You already have one in PA.
Right.
You have one in Iowa.
Right.
Now what?
Ohio. I have one in Ohio.
3 states.
Yep.
So then what are some? I'm guessing Wisconsin.
So
we've mapped
out the next 5 years,
yeah.
right? So
what does that look like?
So it's Kansas, Kansas, Nebraska. Was Nebraska one of them? Kansas, Illinois, Nebraska, Missouri, and there was one other one I can't think of off the top of my head. Virginia.
Yeah, we talked about Virginia. We talked about Wisconsin. I'll be in Iowa one of those years, so there's like an off year. That would be the Missouri.
And that's the year I'll go to Missouri.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much.
Yeah, those were the next 5. Yeah. That was the short list of 5 that'll be the.
Do you think you'll hit 5 for 5 on that?
I mean, no one bats 1,000. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm going to say yeah because I'm going to try to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're not going to if you don't try to.
Amen.
And so, that'll be the goal. Going, I'm not going there to sightsee. You know? So, the goal would be to stick an arrow in something in each of those states. What my hope is that I can some years start to double up on states. Maybe I don't miss in Iowa on day 6, and I do get to hit Missouri to give myself an opportunity to get
in that 2 week span.
Yeah, to do a twofer. I definitely, then after that, I don't know where I'll go, but that's the goal is to kind of do that. And I'm kind of terming it the DIY slam, all public land DIY slam, and do it in every big buck state. And when I say big buck, it's really like, Pope and Young are better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is really what it is. Because if you're hunting public land in those places and you have a set number of days to get it done, it's like, a lot of states I probably won't go back to after I kill. You know what I mean? It's like I'll probably be off the list and I'll be on to the next, and and that'll be it. But
that'll be cool when you're an old guy and you have that body of work of like that's Virginia, that's blah 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 blah, and have all the different stories rather than this is the back 40 that I hunted 20 years in a row.
Yeah. And then my daughter sells all my shit in an estate sale.
Yep. That's really. I'm friends with the local state's attorney in our county, and I shot a deer, and he's like, "You getting that mounted?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it's like, "I don't know why it's gonna be in the estate sale." It's like
he told you that.
I told him that. And he's like, "Yeah, you're right." That's the thing. It's like the most coveted thing for us, and even whitetail cribs. You go there, and that person is. That is what they're most fired up about. Like that is like the first thing. Like, oh, you got to come in here. Then they die.
Yep.
And then it doesn't that's it.
Yep. It either goes to a state. And then it gets all old and weird, which I think looks cool. Like I like to go to antique places and look at the old mounts that before they knew how to do taxidermy, and they just look ugly and ridiculous. Like it's got a skinny neck like this and a huge head like this. Yeah. I just think that stuff's cool. Like really bad taxidermy is interesting to me.
There's a Twitter account for that.
Yeah. It's there's a store for that where I live. But that's the goal. We'll see. There's other hunts in there. Like this year, I'm going to Colorado for elk and bear hunt. So that'll be cool. I still want to hunt big game. I got an invite to Canada to hunt right outside the bow zone.
Nice.
I got someone who was like, I'll sponsor you or whatever, or bring you over or whatever. So. I want to add that because that would just be a really cool hunt.
That'd be really cool.
I do have my big bucket list hunt is my wife won't approve it. Is I want to hunt grizzly with a bow. That's the thing that I want to do. But she's like, not until our daughter is old and out of the house.
Holy crap.
Right. So which I can respect that, but it's just and I don't know that I'll ever get to do that. It's like an expensive hunt. It's like a $30,000 hunt to go do something like that because I'd like to go to Kodiak Island, and do it where they have the biggest brown bears or whatever. But they're aggressive animals. I just like the idea that you're not the only one hunting. I think that's interesting. So
to say the least.
Yeah, but we'll see. I've been to Alaska once. It's just really cool country, and I look forward to getting back. But the DIY slam is my thing. That's one thing I really want to do, and I'm going to make an effort toward it.
I'm excited to follow that.
Yeah,
follow that along. That's really cool. And I think you're the first to coin it. So if anyone tries to steal it, I think you're the first to coin it.
Yeah.
Do you think that's fair? Have you heard it?
Nope, never. That's first time.
I own it. Set it right here. We're gonna put it in the mail.
Yeah.
Mail it to myself.
Yep.
Register's trademark.
Right. Yeah. We'll see it on someone's YouTube channel in like a week.
Maybe.
Maybe.
It'll be the.
You'll have to call him and yell.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Woo.
Oh yeah, getting frisky.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the plan. I don't know what do you think, man? You think I'll pull it off?
Well, I wouldn't bet against you.
Yeah.
That's fair.
That's a vote of
And I'm going to be a
confidence.
part of it, so it's like
Damn right
it's
you
like
are.
quarter mine.
That's
I'm
right.
just tagging along.
Right. Maybe you'll steal it. Maybe you'll do it before me. If he does it before me, I'll be pissed.
Well, what do you have right now? Ohio?
Yeah, I've never killed a buck out of state, other than West Virginia. That doesn't really count.
What was
It
it?
is a different state. How does it not
It's
count?
rifle season.
Oh, okay.
We're not killing
What
big
was like
deer.
Pope and Young level?
No,
Okay.
no, it's like the hills have eyes on slaughter.
Jesus.
Oh man.
That's just our family thing, We go down for Thanksgiving, and it's just like family tradition. You just you go down, hang out with the locals, and kill whatever you see.
I mean, it's part of that region. I mean, Pennsylvania's kind of the same thing, like because gun season comes in, and that's the way it always was growing up. It was like that was a big deal. Like
Yeah.
you had dinner, then you went out and shot your guns after like you'd eat Thanksgiving around noon, right? And then you would go out and shoot guns after that, sight your guns in. No one picked their gun up any other time during the course of the year, except that day. And then you go out and you hunted on Monday was the opener, and you go down to camp on like Saturday and spend Saturday and Sunday at camp and start hunting on
Nice.
Monday. And it would just be the fling lead.
Yep.
That's how it went. I remember as a kid watching, hearing bullets ricochet past me or watch them hit the dirt like out in front of me or whatever.
Woo.
Yeah. I mean, we owned our own land too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't like I was out in the middle of like, the heaviest pressured piece of public or whatever, but it's just that was how much hunting pressure there was around my house. It sounded like a war zone.
The legitimate Orange Army.
Legit, yeah. It was, I was part of it. I mean, I had this whole total orange jumpsuit thing
here.
It was like it was just it was warm and
Blaze orange onesie.
yeah. My dad was like, "Here, you put one of these on," and that was what I wore, and I wore it for years. And that was, I mean, that's how I knew hunting, and that's how I got introduced, But
You're in a blaze orange. Is there a little bit of snuff in it? You're good.
yeah, I mean, I was 10. I was chilling, It's like
Crack open a Milwaukee's best when we get back.
people listening are like, "What the hell just happened? Like, where's this guy going?" I don't know that I can share that story here, but
There's a lot of inside stuff going on in this podcast.
yeah. Come out to one of the shows,
Yeah.
at some point and see us at one of the booths, whether it's if I come to Deer or ASIC, maybe with you guys or whatever.
We were working out and getting booth space for Total Archery Challenge Seven Springs. I don't know if you'll be out
I'll
there
be
that way.
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe we'll do a chill out and we can hear the Clint Campbell story.
Yeah,
childhood
stop
stories.
by the Total Archery Challenge booth and you can hear my 10-year-old chewing snuff and man-sized work story.
Insert a token, get a Clint story.
Yeah, exactly. There's a bunch of them. You can help fund my DIY slam. How's that? There we go.
Perfect. That's fun.
Yeah.
Where we at? How we doing?
Oh, we are just a little over an hour and six minutes, something like that.
Anything else you want to cover? This is kind of a co-podcast here.
Yeah.
We're going to go live on both platforms.
Yeah, I want to know. So the one thing I need. I've known you guys for a long time, right? I've been using the trail cameras for as long as almost as the company's been around, right?
Yeah.
The one thing I still struggle with is late season trail camera placement. Like I either there are no deer where I'm putting my trail cameras, or I'm incredibly bad at placing them for late season. Every other time of the year, like I'm good. It's just late season I cannot get a single deer that's worth going after on camera.
As far as like daylight movement or just inventory in general?
Just both across the board.
Really?
I mean, I struggle to get animals on camera in general once Thanksgiving ends for the most part.
Let me jump in on this.
Yeah.
I guess scrapes outside of the doe bedding areas where I'm at, there's a lot of – this isn't every farm either, too. There's like one or two farms that this works on where it's a high deer density. Finding that magical scrape outside of a bedding area, doe bedding area, I have that buck I killed this year, the year prior, I had that bully buck come in. Let me back up. He hit a scrape, tail tuck, mature whitetail, and then right after that, that bully 9-pointer came in, worked the scrape the same exact day, and this was January. And then earlier that morning, I had like 3.5-year-old buck sparring, and then I had a yearling doe come and hit it. So right there, that tells you high deer density area. Keep in mind of those doe bedding areas and those magical scrapes because they're still active, and maybe those yearlings are actually going into heat then, and obviously it's bringing in a lot of big deer. That's been pretty helpful, I guess. That's the most visual example I have in having that sequence in that particular morning. And I set up on there actually too, knowing that. And it was a situation where I did a hang and hunt off that doe bedding area, and I got set up. I could see the does bedded on one ridge. I could see the bucks bedded on the other ridge. Right before dark, the does dropped down, ping, 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 and then the bucks, and then they kept getting bigger, and then the biggest one never showed up. But that was a really one of my, I guess, more favorite hunts in the last 2 years.
So am I giving up on scrapes too early, do you think?
I mean, 99% of them are dead, and you would be wasting your time. But I guess finding that one. Yeah, and I think that probably correlates more to deer density than anything else.
Right, and I think some of that I'm up against is that I am a little bit challenged with some deer density in certain spots, given that it's all public for the most part, and they've been just hammered.
Yep.
You know what I mean? After gun season in my area, so I'm probably just in the wrong spots, to be honest with you. Like I'm probably not.
Sorry, that advice is
right.
Is helpful then for
no,
your area,
no, it is, because I think I'm just thinking of like one parcel in particular. It's like I think I just need to spend more time finding where the hidey hole is after gun season.
Yep.
Because I think that's the part that I'm missing. I think that's one of the downfalls, honestly, is like the way that I kind of transitioned to hunting. I think what it really helps me at is that pre-rut kind of time frame. I think what I haven't figured out yet is how to leverage it during late season. That's the part that I haven't quite figured out how to use it, because I know like Zach and those guys from the hunting public, like they still hunt that way all year round. I haven't got there yet to where it works for me for late season. Like, what do you think, man? Because I mean, all the cameras I have are on public. Like, is there places that you prioritize? And I know you like to keep your camera set too.
I do. I still have the majority of my cameras. If I'm going to set a camera specific for late season, there's a food source there. But the majority of the time, 90% of those photos that I'm getting are after shooting hours. So it's still trying to, okay, this deer's showing up 30 minutes after daylight. Like, where can I go and hunt him during the day? So I'm still taking those pictures and trying to relate that to movement back to bedding,
right,
or security cover or thermal cover or whatever, wherever I think that deer's actually laying his head during the day. But to be totally honest, like, we haven't had a whole lot of success like that.
Where are you putting your cameras now that are not being successful?
So Cameron, we have Cameron here filming this. A couple different cameras running here, and his question to Clint is, where is Clint placing these cameras where he's not finding success in the late season?
Yeah. So on the one piece, it was actually off of a food source, and I checked it shortly after I had placed it because I went in and hunted it, and there wasn't anything showing up. Now, truth be told, it's been sitting now for almost a month now, and I haven't looked at it, so I could have something on camera. On the one piece, it was right off a bedding area where I did have a good buck on camera earlier in the year, and I had him there pretty consistent through October and November, and then just vanished. And he wasn't the only deer I had on camera. I was getting plenty of does and stuff on camera there too, and then all of a sudden they vanished. So that was right outside of a bedding area. Another one was actually outside of a food source as well. Same kind of thing. It dried up, but I think that was more because that particular food source dried up, and so that was kind of the culprit there. I think what I'm doing is I'm still kind of keeping them placed in certain like pinch points and funnels and stuff like that, and bedding, and where I probably need to move them out of those locations. I think the other thing that you mentioned when you mentioned food source, it just made me think of something, is that, and I know you and I have talked about this a little bit, I think what will help me with placement during late season is, and it's just something I need to get better at in general, is identifying those non-dominant primary food sources, right? So like when I say that, it's not like, yeah, you can find an acorn tree that maybe dropped late, like a white oak. Maybe there's some left on the ground, but if you had a wet year, then they're rotted. Then they're no good.
Right.
Or find the cycle of the red oaks because they'll drop every 18 months, so they're usually off cycle from white oaks. So it's like you find that if there's any of those around. But then it even goes to like species of browse and stuff like that, and that's where it's like I wish I was a biologist or like a forester or something like that, because those are just things like that I don't know.
Yeah.
And when you talk to a guy like, I know you guys just had Johnny Stewart on, that guy's a late season beast. You know what I mean? And he just like, and he can pick
That's his
out
favorite part of the season.
Oh yeah, it's completely his favorite part of the season. And Greg loves early October before the rut, and he loves late season. And those two dudes are just really good at finding food sources and knowing what the food sources are in the places that they're hunting that aren't the dominant sources.
Right.
And that's the part that I need to spend more time with, because I think the guys who get it done in those hard to hunt times a year are really, really good at picking out those types of things. And that's just something I've not spent a lot of time with.
I think that's a skill set that you can learn easier probably than the instinctual things of getting how far can you get in, on a bed or something like that. That's just nature.
Right. Well, it just comes down to prioritizing it.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, going back to the biology class of learning tree species and plant species and just talking to dudes like, guys from the QDMA.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That just, that can give you a lot of that information.
Yeah, but I guess that's just hard knowledge versus instinct.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
it's not non-subjective.
You can learn this in a book.
right.
Yeah.
How close you can set up on a buck, you cannot learn in a book.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think certain times a year, like the one outweighs the other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's October's a little easier, even if you are relying on food, because you either have a primary ag food source, right, or you're going to have acorns that are going to be like, that's what's going to take them away from that primary, right? So you find those, and then you're good to go. It's when that stuff starts to dry up, right, and then like the instinctual part of like what their scrape and rub activity are telling you or whatever starts to go away. Then I start to grasp at straws. You know what I mean? And I'm like, and that to me is like, if I'm being completely honest, I'd love to get you guys' perspective on this, but like for me, it's like I won't feel like I'm an accomplished whitetail hunter until I can consistently kill deer in early October. Like that's kind of my because right now, like all my success has been around that pre-rut and rut time period, and I'm hunting hard. Like, don't get me wrong, but like, guys like Greg, most of his deer have all been killed in early October.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think Eberhard, a lot of his have been killed in early October as well. I think Infault has a bunch that have been in early October. Yep. Cody kills deer in early October. Andre kill. I'm just looking at guys that get it done in a big way, and I'm like, they kill a lot of deer in early October.
I think anyone who's hunting deer similar in the fashion that we are, and they want to do it with purpose, like you don't want to leave anything to luck. Yeah. And I don't want to say that everybody that's killing deer during the rut, like they're doing it because of luck, but when you're doing it when it's on the deer's terms, it's a little bit different because their senses are still keen. They're not walking around like zombies. I mean, I've had encounters during the rut where you could be drenched in gasoline and that deer wouldn't have cared.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and I think as people or personalities in the industry, guys, I guess, what am I trying to say here? Your peers, your industry peers, I think that us as a group kind of awe when guys are killing deer on a consistent basis. For sure. in early October.
In your guys' mindset, what is that line? Where is early October no longer early?
I mean,
for a date.
I'm just going to say that the 25th, if like you're killing deer before the 25th of October every single year.
Yeah. Like I was actually even going to go earlier.
Yeah.
I was going to say the 15th. Like, so before like scrapes even really come into play, because to me it's like I see like scrapes really starting to open up around that like 15th and later time frame. And so for me, it's like I look at it almost like the first 2 weeks of October. Like if you're consistently killing deer the first 2 weeks of October, and I would probably push a little further past that, but that's always kind of been my like line of demarcation. Now my season also comes in like the 19th, between the 15th and 19th of September.
Okay.
So I've already had a month where I live to do that. Now outside of that, and places that are opening October 1 or September 29th or whatever it is, then yeah, I'd probably say like right before that critical like pre-rut time frame kind of hits, that I would still consider that early October. But for me, it's like I've already had a month in the timber at that point. So it's like I've had 4 weeks. If I'm gonna make hay, I should have made hay already. You know what I mean? So that's just kind of how I look at it. And I had encounters this year, like in that time frame, like with the 2 deer that I had on camera. I had encounters with both of them, you know, in that between, I guess it was the 19th of September and the 15th of October, and just couldn't seal the deal. So I would have entered that club. Damn it.
Next year.
Yeah. So what are some things that you guys like for this upcoming year? Like I always try to pick something and work on, and I know what my thing is this year that I'm gonna like devote the off season to kind of working on or thinking about. What is it for you guys? Like, what do you guys try to pick something every year that you want to work on to get better at, or learn, add to your bag of tricks, or whatever the case is?
Yeah, I want to kill a slob in the last 10 days of October this year.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like I'm right on the cusp. The last few years, it's right on the cusp of killing a slob, and I just don't quite get it done. And I think that's probably just from lack of growing up as a kid. I was a rut, like wait till the rut. Like I would go out a few times with low expectations, and then I would really kick things on around Halloween. So now going in and trying to learn that is not a kid.
Right.
I feel like I'm close.
Right.
I know I'm going to be able to get it done, but I'm just not quite there yet. My skill set's not quite there. This year I hope to do it.
What do you think it is that you need to adjust to get there?
I don't know yet.
You don't know yet?
I don't know yet. Probably
You're like, listen, jerk, if I knew I'd already did it.
No, honestly, probably just be more aggressive
right.
and maybe just try to single out a deer a little bit harder than what I do. I start bouncing around.
Do you hunt a specific deer pretty often? Like
not super often, but I go in like a 2 or 3 day spurts where I'm hunting a specific deer, and then I'm like, screw this, go on to the next one.
Right.
This particular year it was, I found a scrape last year at postseason scouting. There was a Boone and Crockett clean frame giant deer. Found a giant scrape. I said, if he's alive, he's going to hit this in late October. I hung a camera there second week of October, and I went and checked it, I don't know, like maybe the 18th or 19th, and sure enough, he was there that morning, straight 10, 175-inch deer. And then so I go and set up, and I hunt. The one day I don't hunt, he's in there 7 o'clock in the morning. I go hunt, and then he's on another camera locked onto a doe October 24th. So right there, that would have been honestly a fantastic deer. Just wasn't quite there, right in the same area. That night when I was hunting, I 100 or probably 200 yards within him, tailing a doe, and just didn't get it done. So what could have I done differently? I'll obviously be over there, but I don't know.
Right.
My instincts didn't tell me to be there. So long story short, I'm doing a good job of finding slobs in late October and getting close, but I just need to get better. And I think that just comes with reps and talking and listening to people that get it done at that time.
Is there anything with like the weather or pressure or anything like that you've seen that maybe you could start to key in on?
Those fronts for sure in late October. I mean, they're killer. I think there's probably some other things that I haven't keyed in on yet, but annual data with cameras, keen in on scrapes. I mean, we created Scrape Week out of the pure love that I have for late October.
Right, yeah.
so like if there was, so scrapes definitely I think, and I key in on that, and maybe that's a shortcoming. I need to be looking at things of why they're going to that scrape and how do I get across that area to maybe not be set up on the scrape but still get them. So I don't know. I don't know yet.
Yeah, it's almost like figuring out what his route is to that scrape, might be like the ticket versus on that scrape.
Yeah, well,
is this right outside bedding?
Here's part of the problem too. I was hunting that scrape in the morning because that's when he was coming off the hills. He was coming off the hills in the morning and going in the bottoms to, I'm guessing he was feeding on acorns on the hill, and so dropping down there. One morning I did bump a deer walking in. It very well could have been him. Right. And so basically he was going back to bed. Now here's the problem too. I'm hunting, this is a small little parcel. I know where that deer, I really feel like I knew where that deer was, but that was on the neighbors and I couldn't hunt it. So kind of playing with those rules make it a whole other challenge. I know there's big woods is very difficult, but to have the freedom to move around and go with your instinct, that's an advantage where I'm sitting there holding my cards a lot of times and hoping for the best. And I hate to say it that way, but I feel like I'm in the game. I wish I could be 300 yards away from here, but he's crossed through here in daylight,
Yeah.
so let's try to test our luck.
I think that's something that people don't recognize a lot, because a lot of people say, hey, hunting big woods is tough, and it is. Like, and I like to hunt big woods. It's one of the reasons why I like to hunt is because I do get to be aggressive and mobile, and if I don't find them here, I'll go over here and find something else. But I do hunt small parcels fairly often too, because I live in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and so a lot of the chunks that I'm hunting are like, I've got one chunk that I hunt that's 25 acres. I got another piece that's 60 acres. I've got another piece that's like maybe 300, and I've got another one over here that's 80. So it's like it's a lot of small pieces, and like, so I literally hunt those mobile still, but it's like I hunt them mobile almost from my truck. It's like I'll literally pull into a lot, and if like it's on that 60 acre piece, and it's like I see 2 trucks there or whatever, I'm like, all right, well, there's only 2 good spots I would hunt here in general anyway that my scouting and hunting has told me to hunt. So I'll just drive to the next piece. Oh, they got cars there? All right, I'm driving to the next piece. Oh, there's no one here. It might be the worst piece I have, but it's the piece that there's nobody at, and that's where I'll end up being.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I totally get you, man. It's like, because you can't always go where they're at. Like, you can look at the map and you're like, I know he's right here.
Oh, yeah,
You know
and
what
you
I
can
mean?
correlate it. And I'm not saying if I went in there, I'd go and slam dunk it on the first sip, but I know I'd have a better opportunity.
Yeah, I had the same instance on like a family farm a couple years ago. I had this deer that was showing up at night. Well, he would show up in daylight all summer, get him in a clover field, and then he would right around like the 15th to the 19th of October, he would just like go completely nocturnal on our property, right? Like I would only get pictures of him at night, and I would never see him on the hoof. And then finally, a late season hunt, even though I suck at late season, just happened to see this deer during late season one year, and started figuring him out. And I was like, I had him on a couple of different scrapes, and I thought he was bedded on the neighbors. And so there was one kind of area that I knew it was like a really good pinch point that he'd probably have to travel through. And late season, he would start showing up on cameras like right at the cusp of dark. You know what I mean? Like where if you could catch him like 50 to 100 yards into the timber, it's like you would have a shot, right? Mm-hmm. And so I set up, and I ended up seeing him. And then I was like, oh, I think I figured him out. So I hunted him 3 more days, and out of the 4 days I hunted him, I had 3 encounters. All of them were with like in 40, 50 yards. I just never got a shot opportunity. So I did a little bit more intel, during the off season. I saw him enter a field, was glass, and watched him come into a field, how he came into this like one food source, kind of told me where I thought he was bedded. And I looked at my father-in-law, and I was like, I'm going to kill that deer opening day. And he's like, yeah, the hell you will. Set up for him. He showed up the opening day. It was, October 1st. I hunted him in the evening. I was in the tree maybe 2 hours, and he showed up with a couple other deer. Wind swirled. One got downwind of me, busted me, and they were gone. But it was one of those things where it's like I knew he was bedded across this creek bottom over on the neighbor's piece, and I knew exactly where he was just based on the places I had him on trail camera. Mm-hmm. But there was nothing I could do about it. My best opportunity was to kill him where I was at, and that was all I had.
That's all you can do.
Yeah, and so from there, I never saw him. A buddy of mine, I ended up killing him actually that gun season. Mm. But so, what's the thing you want to work on, man? Like, what's your plan for this year of trying to get better?
There's really 2 things. One is being more opportunistic and not being fixated on one deer, and I feel like that's something that outside of 2018 that I've done. 2016, 2017.
You're going to do it this year, too.
And I'm going to end up doing it this year, too.
No, you won't, because I'm going to be there.
It's so, like, when you run as many cameras as we run, we get a lot of big deer on camera. Yeah. And
especially down there, dude. I mean, it's like there's just stupid big, I mean, you get hammers.
Careful.
No, I do not. There's no deer.
Careful.
Jake's stock answer. Everyone at the show is like, hey, you get any big deer on camera? It's like, Jake, I haven't seen a big deer ever.
These are all from Indiana. These are all from blank forest.
Right.
Well, the area it's a low deer density area, but the age structure is really, really well. Yeah. So it's not uncommon. I mean, we've been down there for 5 years, and I've had the opportunity to hunt 190-inch deer. 186-inch deer was actually killed by a friend of ours, and then 170-inch typical, at least 170-inch typical 10. So it's like, in my mind, I'm always pinning myself, trying to be the best hunter that I can be. And that's measured, everybody measures that's differently. For me, it's killing the biggest, baddest animal that I have the opportunity to do so with.
Right.
So it's kind of bit me in the butt the last, 4 out of the 5 years or whatever, passing 130-inch deer or passing deer that I probably have no business passing, But that's just my mindset. And that's my personality. So not to be romantic about one deer is one thing that I do want to get better at. But it's so damn hard. I actually told Jake, I don't know if I should speak these words into existence, but
Oh boy, are you sure?
yeah, I'm not even gonna say.
Well,
it.
you made me put out the DIY slam, so let's come with it.
So, you've seen. I mean, you know the whole story. You've seen all the pictures and whatnot. It's a world-class deer on public ground.
Yeah.
And I told Jake, I don't know if it was yesterday or today, that I wouldn't be upset if we go down there in 2 weeks and I find the deadhead, like him dead, because then I know I don't have to hunt him.
Right.
That sounds like
he's got you bad, dude.
I know.
He's got you ate up,
dude. There's not more than a couple of days a week that go by without me thinking like, all right, how am I going to kill this deer?
Yeah.
Like
we're going to kill him.
Looking at
he's going to be
maps,
alive, and
cameras.
one of us is going to kill him. What I like to say is we're going to find his sheds. Like, I'm going to find his sheds. That's what I like to say. And then whenever I kill that deer this year, I'll give you the sheds.
Constellation prize. Here you go. Here's when you hunted him.
But no, whenever you and I decided that we were going to go back there, it was I think it was right after I got back from Iowa we were talking, and I was like, let's go ahead and think about when we want to go down and start scouting and looking around, because what we had said was that, I mean, folks out there listen, like this piece is huge. Like there's so much land.
Yeah, it's 66,000 acres.
Yeah. And so this ridge system, like literally the both of us, and even if we had 2 other people with us, whatever the case was, we would all be able to hunt those same ridge systems.
It hunts giant.
The entire time and not step on each other at all.
Nope.
And that was one of the things you and I said, was that we're going to hunt that kind of general area mobily, right? Not going to get stuck in a spot, but we're going to hunt that because there's a couple really big deer in that general area that kind of call that spot home.
So that 170-inch 10 that
was
S-band. Yeah, S-band. Yep. That deer's still alive. So we had him on camera. And where I was hunting the other deer, their home ranges overlap. So you would have both deer in daylight, in that area. So there's a couple really big deer that are still roaming around there. But so that's one thing I want to work on. The other thing is something you brought up earlier, and that is identifying species of trees and relating that to food and at what time of the year. I just feel like it's a lost art in today's whitetail world. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of guys that do it and do it well. And, as we were talking earlier, like that's non-subjective information. Like you just need to spend time learning it, and then it's yours forever.
Yep.
And I feel like I'm better than most, but I'm not nearly as good as what I should be.
Yeah.
Especially for a big woods guy, I mean, yes, I can identify the difference between red oaks, white oaks. I do know some subspecies, but there's just so much more there that I don't have a clue.
Yeah.
So
and that's the thing for me. It's like, for me, like the hardest, like being, I mean, we can all relate to this because, I mean, we all have jobs, regardless of whether you work in the outdoor industry or not. It's like you still have responsibilities to take care of. So, people think like, oh, these guys own a truck company, they probably hunt 7 days a week. It's like, it's just not the case, right? Yeah. It's like most of the guys I know who work in the outdoor industry actually probably hunt less than I do a lot of times, you know, just because that's the peak of your season too, as far as inquiries goes. Yeah. So for me, it's like, I really feel like, until I learn that aspect of it that you were mentioning, I'm really shortening my season. Mm-hmm. Like I'm shortening it by like for me, it's like my season ends where I live, like I think January 29th or 25th this year. I forget, you told me what it was. I think it was like the 18th. Okay, statewide 18th. I'm in special regs. Was it special regs the same? A little longer, yeah. So I think it was like the 25th in special regs. So I get like almost the entire month of January to hunt. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I'm really losing that, and my capabilities really limit me to like right before Christmas, kind of. Right. You know what I mean? It's like if I don't get it done by then, I'm really going to struggle because I'm not sharp with those. aspects of it that are going to help me get on deer in late season whenever they are at their highest of alert, right? And the misnomer is that they got to go find food, but they don't. Like they have to go find food when it gets really cold, right? And that was something I learned from Don Higgins, is that their bodies actually shut down and their metabolism slow because it's evolution, right? It's like otherwise they would die because there's just food's scarce at that time. And so people think that like, well, they got to go eat it every day. It's like, no, they don't actually. It's like they actually eat less during that time of year, except when you get like driving, nasty weather and it makes them have to move. That's when you hunt them. And that's whenever you can go, oh, there's this subspecies of whatever browse, whatever, or there's this, elm tree stump that still has sprouts on it. Like that's, it's like, and that's a food, right? So it's like knowing that type of stuff and timing it right to hunt it. And that's the thing. Those are the things that I'm trying to learn. But my big thing for this year is actually ground hunting, is hunting from the ground. That's like the thing that I'm adding to my repertoire. Just because I feel like some of those areas for late season where deer want to go aren't always the places that are the easiest to hunt from a tree because they're thicker, they're nastier, especially where I live where there's a lot of swamp and stuff like that. I feel like they retreat to those areas mainly because most people don't hunt from the ground. So there's likely not going to be a lot of hunters in that area, not just during that time of year, but ever, Right. So that's why I want to add that to the ground, or that to my game, because I want to be as mobile as I possibly can be. I kind of stole something from Josh Profit, was that, I want to be like a coyote. I want to hunt for opportunity, But that also means I want to hunt for opportunity whenever opportunity provides itself, right? So not just for an animal, not hunting a specific buck, hunting like for a good buck in an area, right? But it also means hunting for opportunities that are like just out there in front of you to hunt, that present themselves that maybe don't have a tree to get into. I still want to be able to hunt those areas. And so, especially walking in with a saddle super light, throw a ghillie jacket on top of that, and then I'm good to go from the ground or from a tree,
right.
Whatever I need to do for that particular setup.
I think it's a good strategy.
Yeah. So, and I think it'll help, especially when we start talking about the DIY slam,
Hell
right?
yeah.
Is that when you start going to those plain states, whether it's Kansas or whether it's Nebraska or whatever, it's like you're really, if you can't hunt from the ground, you're going to have a real hard time in those places.
That's the beauty of the DIY slam. You can get it done in any environment.
Yeah. So it's but the challenging part is that's something I can't work on necessarily in the off season, right? It's like, that's just something you kind of have to do.
Make it happen.
In real time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I'm picking the brains of the Schefflers and the Fehrenbaugh and whatever, and trying to talk to those guys about how they get it done and how they approach, and when they're worried about their wind, when they're not, when they're sticking to the shadows, when they're not, how fast they're moving, when they're moving slow, like all those, like there's so much to it, you know.
Are you able to apply that in the fly? Like do those conversations come back to you when you're actually out there making it happen?
For me, they do.
Okay.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I don't know, like my brain just works that way. It's like almost like the way I remember things is like episodic. It's almost like a TV show that happens in my head. You know what I mean? Like when things happen, you know what I mean? Like I'll see something, like I'll be honest with you, whenever I walked through that CRP field in Iowa this year up on that draw, I stopped. And when I stopped there, I was like, I just clicked back and I was like, I saw Zach do a hunt almost exactly like this. And I was like, okay, let me stop for a second. And I kind of assessed. But the way I screwed up was that classic mistake of a guy who hasn't ground hunted, you know, really ever, other than gun hunting growing up, was that the wind was directly in my face. That deer was bedded looking in my direction. You know what I mean? Like that was like, if I would have thought of that beforehand, and I actually would have been like, you know what? Let me circle up the upside of this draw and basically come down almost parallel with him and try to get in behind him, I might have had a chance to kill him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's just the, you know, a learning opportunity, you know. But yeah, I do think of those things whenever I see them. You know what I mean? It's like it'll take me back to a conversation I've had with Chad or with Greg or whoever. It's like I'll see something and be like, oh, I talked about this with so and so. This is how I should approach this or whatever.
That's interesting.
But you know, if it's not something that's second nature yet, I guess I should say, certain things that become second nature, they just kind of happen. But things that I'm still working and learning on, I will stop and kind of go through the mental Rolodex and try to figure it out, or try to get an analog to figure out how to approach it. Same way like you would take apart like a marketing problem or like a business problem. You know what I mean? It's like I try to see if there's an analog somewhere that I can use, you know, and just go, might not be exactly right, but at least now I have an approach.
Framework.
Yeah, exactly. So
I wish I had that. I get in a hurry when I'm out there.
yeah, I've gotten better about that, of slowing down and taking my time. And I think part of it is just that mobile scout to hunt kind of approach, because I'm really not trying to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that's that whole idea of like start without an end in mind. You know what I mean? If I don't have a place I'm trying to get, then the place I'm at's the best spot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's allowed me to kind of slow down. And you'd be surprised, like when you slow down, like you're walking and stuff like that, like it slows down your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You're able to kind of like think through things and dissect things a little bit better. But what I do also do, and I'd like to get you guys' perspective on this too. It's like I've just gotten to a point to where it's like I've second guessed myself out of situations so many times that I made the wrong choice. I've stopped doing that. Like if I see something that makes me go, oh yeah, like I don't think about it again. I set up to hunt it, because I've too many times walked by a spot. It happened not this past year, but the year before. I saw one of my target bucks near a scrape line, and I walked by some really good sign. I was like, oh yeah. I was like, oh man, let me keep going, and I walked right by it, and then ended up having the deer I wanted to kill on that camera while I sat somewhere else that same day. So I started, when something tells me immediately, I don't second guess it. I don't think about it again. I just take action.
Well, I think that's the mental side to whitetail hunting, to me, is the hardest part of having confidence in what you're seeing and knowing like, hey, this spot is right versus okay, what if I go another 100 yards, maybe it gets better. Maybe I go another 200 yards, maybe it gets even better than that. So it's like I go back to like the fear of missing out. Like that's something, and again, it's not something that you're going to learn by reading or listening to a podcast or watching on a YouTube video. Like you have to be able to go out and make the mistakes and correlate what you're seeing to some type of experience that's telling you like, hey, this is right or this is wrong. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to me, there's no other way to do it.
Right. Yeah, I stopped, I'll ask this question. I want to ask you both this because, I in the past, I think I started making better decisions when I stopped giving a flying shit about what anyone else was going to think about how I hunted or the approach I was taking. Mm-hmm. And part of it was, and I've been really transparent about this and I've talked about this, that like I've felt a certain amount of pressure because I have a hunting podcast. Mm-hmm. And I felt like in order to validate my position, I needed to kind of do certain things and achieve certain things and do things a certain way, even though like my buddies, like the guys I'm sitting here with, like we're never ever going to judge, right? And I typically don't care what other people thought. I didn't care whenever I was in music what other people thought, right? But for some reason, like this one I did for some reason, right? Yeah. And it was like once I shed that and I was like, you know what? If they can like it, they can not like it. They can criticize me for it. They can tell me that I don't know what I'm doing. Like, and I just really don't care, right? And once I did that, it was like I started making much better decisions and started trusting my gut more and hunting more instinctively. So I'm curious, if you feel the same way, and then I want to come to you because I'm curious and I'll give you this part of the question for you so you can stew on it for a minute. I'm curious if you're getting stuck on certain deer is any relation to your position in the outdoor industry. So go to Jake. I want to see what he says first about like.
Reframe the question I
sorry. I had 20 questions right there. I've never done this before. Do you think being a brand in the outdoor space in the position that you have, right, and now also having media that goes along with that, right, with like YouTube, Whitetail Cribs, the podcast, Trail Cam Radio, do you feel like that adds any additional pressure when you hunt? That you need to achieve certain things or do certain things a certain way because of the position and the visibility you have in the industry?
I don't think it's necessarily that, but it's probably just more so the pressure I put on myself.
You put pressure on yourself in general.
Yeah, and I think even if I had a traditional marketing job where no one even cared, what'd you do on the weekend? Oh, I don't care.
Right.
I would still probably have the same equal amount of pressure that I put on myself I just want to kill big deer, right? Because seeking the moment of truth when it all happens. I don't. Maybe subconsciously. I mean, I think anyone that says that they don't, I think. Well, if it didn't happen, what would we talk about on the podcast? Like, there's
right.
I think.
Or how would you answer all the questions you get at the booth? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
how many times do you get asked like, "Hey man, how was your season?"
Pretty
And
good.
if every year you're like, "I didn't see shit," you know what I mean? It's like it's a pretty short conversation,
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, yeah, I totally get the question, but I really don't think I do, and I think it's probably just more self-inflicted. Like, I just want to grow as a hunter because I, thoroughly enjoyed the process of it. And my favorite thing too, I guess, growing up, I would put more, I guess, priority on schoolwork and like getting that stuff done. And so once I graduated, and these two things kind of merged together.
Right.
I guess it was like a rebirth for the love of whitetails because now, these are 2-in-1 versus, school being the number one priority.
Right. You mentioned something that was interesting there, which is like you like the process, right? And I think no matter what it is you're doing, whether it's your job, whatever it is, whitetail hunting, like if you don't love the process of it, like you're just not going to like it. You know what I mean? Because there's so much failure in it to get good at anything that you better enjoy trying to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise you're going to have a pretty miserable existence in that space and probably burn out on it and end up, doing something else.
Yeah, and I guess obviously we talked to all these people and that helps shape how I hunt. But I'm kind of this I'm just going to do what I'm going to do anyways. And a lot of times my dad, obviously I grew up around him deer hunting and we bounce ideas are all like back and forth all the time. He's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm just going to do it." Like, "What are you going to do?" Like, "You're going to go hunt the same tree again?" Like, I'm going to go do something different. So I guess I'm a bit of a like I enjoy hunting by myself. I enjoy doing my own thing and figuring out on my own.
Right.
At this point, and who's to say that doesn't evolve at some point? But right now, yeah.
Right.
I don't know if that answered your question, but
no, it does. It sounds like it's like you don't. If there is any additional pressure based on having a podcast and an outdoor company and stuff like that, you don't recognize it. That it's subconscious if it is there.
I haven't reached my full whitetail potential. I know that, and that's where I want to be.
Right.
And I don't think you ever fully reach your whitetail potential, but I have plenty of room for growth, and I see that more so than anything else. Like. I just want to grow throughout that process and figure it out on my own. And obviously get better year by year. So that's the most important thing to me.
Right. So what about you, man? Coming back to you for the same question. Do you think, your position in the space, that you add extra pressure because of that? And do you think part two of that is, do you think that somewhat influences your infatuation with a specific deer, that you romance a specific deer, each year?
I growing up, my whitetail youth is a lot different than 99%.
I'll say it is.
Other whitetail hunters. So, I hunt for myself. I don't hunt for anyone. That's it. Like, I don't hunt for Clint Campbell. I don't hunt for Cameron. I don't hunt for Jake. I don't hunt for Exodus. My fixation on big deer has nothing to do with the industry. Mm-hmm. It's, I grew up, I was able to kill a few big deer, big deer growing up. And to me, it's about just almost getting excited. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I feel like it's almost a disadvantage when you have those experiences as a youth and then you see 120 or 130 inch deer and you almost feel guilty about not being excited when you see those.
Right.
Or have an encounter with a deer like that. So that side of it has nothing to do with anybody else. It relates back to my youth, and then people telling me like, "Oh, you're never gonna be able to duplicate that again. Right. Oh, you did it twice, you'll never do it a third time. Oh, you're never gonna do that." So it's like almost I guess it is self-imposed as far as, as Jake said, trying to grow as a hunter. And like, I'm a competitive guy. Like,
yeah,
if I kill that deer next year, I'm gonna want to kill a bigger deer the following year.
Right.
And like, that's just my personality. But as far as, the industry pressure as a whole, I felt like that was something that was really real for me, like the first 2 years of Exodus. Coming from another industry, starting a company, and it felt like all eyes were on you as like brand owner, brand founder, and you're spitting out and producing all this content. It's like, well, why should anybody listen to you if you're not killing deer? But then, after those first 2 years, you start to look at the landscape of the whitetail space and Exodus as a brand, and it's like no one remembers anyways. You could kill a Boone and Crockett deer 2 years ago, and you see that guy, maybe tell him a story at a trade show in 2016. Well, in 2018, he has no idea what happened in 2016. Like,
right.
They're clueless.
Yep.
So I feel like you said, outside of your core circle of people, like no one really cares.
Yeah.
Now, if you start to kill Boone and Crockett deer every single year, I think your strength and depth of influence grows.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it only grows kind of in a positive direction. Like I don't think it's negative in any way. So the first 2 years, the pressure was real, but I don't think it was from outside influence. It's just internal in your mindset and just being competitive. It's
right.
It was definitely there, but now, like I said, I realize like no one really cares.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I definitely felt that for the first like probably 2 years of the podcast, and then finally it just kind of like went away. I think probably partially it was because when I moved back to PA, it's like I really didn't have any like hunting buddies necessarily. I was starting from scratch when I moved back, and so part of it was I was meeting guys, like you guys or John or whomever, right? And it was like they don't know me from Adam,
right?
You know what I mean? And I just wanted to earn their respect more than anything. You know what I mean? Was what I wanted to do. It wasn't like I didn't want to impress them with like killing a certain size of deer or whatever. It was more of just like I wanted to earn their respect so they knew that I was a dedicated whitetail hunter that was passionate about it and was willing to do whatever he needed to do to try to get the job done. And then what I realized was like those guys that I'm close with, it's like, well, they see that stuff. You know what I mean? It's like. And even if I didn't kill anything or whatever, it's like they wouldn't think differently of me, but they would if I quit.
100%.
Right?
Yep.
That's the difference, right? And so, like once I recognized that and recognized like the quality of the group that I had, I was like, all right, all the pressure of like what I'm killing goes away. It goes back to that process, right? Am I dedicated to the process? Because if I am, like those guys got my back 100%.
Here's the thing: people are gonna talk shit. If
100%.
you're killing deer,
Someone already stole DIY Slam.
Yeah. Well, they're gonna talk shit if you are killing deer. They go, oh well, you're from X state or you hunt X farm, and I could do that too. And if you're not killing deer, then they go, you suck. You can't kill any deer. Like there's no pleasing everyone anyways. Like people are gonna talk shit no matter what. So if I could quit, like this could go away, I'm still gonna hunt the same exact way and still try to get better every single year.
Right.
That is what it boils down to. People are gonna talk shit regardless.
Yeah.
And I'm still gonna try to get better every year. No matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know where the whole like talking shit thing comes from either. It kind of
a lot of egos, I think. I mean,
I mean, I know where it comes from necessarily, but it's like I guess I framed that probably, poorly. It's like I don't understand why there's a need for it, really. I'm not so like I'm not interested enough in what other people are doing. Like what they're killing, what they're hunting. I mean, if they're having a great time and they're liking what they're doing, then I'm like, good on you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, good for you. Right. I mean, I'm interested in what my buddies are doing just because it's like, care about the guys I spend time with and stuff like that, and I want them to be successful and have the type of experiences they want to have and stuff like that. But if Chad or you kill a big deer, I'm super pumped for you, but it does nothing for me. You know what I mean? I'm jacked for you, but it's not like I'm like wearing it like a badge of honor, you know what I mean? And if you don't kill anything, just as well the same way. You know what I mean?
Some of that is just in our DNA. Like when you go back, whatever, thousands of years ago, where you had hunters, you have gatherers, and you look at like the alpha males typically as the hunters. Like I just think that's an alpha male kind of trait. Like you want to be better than the next guy,
But your competitive thing that I would say is like if you're spending time thinking about what someone else is doing, that's time you're not spending doing what you could be doing to be better.
I would agree. I would totally agree. But I think like the root of people talking shit about one another, whether it's on a basketball court, golf course, deer hunting. Like, I think that's where it comes from.
Right. Trash talking's different. Like, you know what I mean?
Well,
like,
that's true. You
right.
can
like
we can trash talk.
Yeah, we'll trash talk each
Right.
other. You know, like that'll happen. Like, you know, if you miss a deer, like I definitely caught some shit. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna lie. You know what I mean? Like caught some shit for that. And it was expected, you know, and it was all in good fun. It wasn't like anyone was, you know, down on me or whatever, you know. And I fully expected it, you know. But yeah, I don't know. It's sometimes, you know, the jealousy thing like confuses me a little bit. Like, I think what you said is really important. It's like, you know, if I hunted on that farm, like people have like to dig on like the hunting celebrities that have these manicured farms, like the Drurys or like the Lukoskis or whatever. Oh yeah, I mean, it's like look, the way I look at it is like if someone says like if I had a farm like that, it's like, well, yeah, I agree. I think it is, you know, and I said it on another podcast, like, do I think that it is easier to hunt and kill a big deer on a farm like that? Yes, 100% I do, right? But is it easy to do the work in order to get yourself in a position to buy that farm and create that atmosphere for yourself so you can go do that? It is not. So it's like if that is something that you want to have, then you should be willing to put in the work to go have that kind of fortune, right? Because like, and if it's not that important to you, then it's not that important to you. Then you shouldn't be bitching about what they're killing and how easy it is for them, right? It's like I make no bones about like, do I think a guy like, you know, take Greg Litzinger, right, for example, is a better hunter than maybe Lee Lukoski or the Drurys, as far as like if you put them on a chunk of public land and say go kill a deer in New Jersey, who do I think would kill the deer first? I'd probably put money on Greg. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean that they're not good hunters. I just don't think they're as good as Greg. You know what I mean? All things being equal. But that doesn't I'm not jealous of their opportunity because they had to work their ass off to make that. Just like Greg has to work his ass off to try to kill deer on public land, right? It's just a different type of work. And so I get really upset when people talk. I shouldn't say get really upset. I'm not that invested in it. But it ticks me off, you know what I mean, when I hear people complain about it because I'm like, you know, you're spending time complaining when you could be getting better. Yeah. Or if that's something you really want, instead of complaining, maybe you should be thinking about, you know, how are you going to make additional money so you can save more, so you can buy that farm that you want, so you can have those type of hunting opportunities. Or you can continue to sit here and complain and not kill deer.
The latter of the two does not work.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. That's just something that always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. You know, poo-pooing someone else's success. But
it's a good question.
Yeah,
we haven't talked about that before.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? Public land hunters better than farm hunters?
Well, here's the flip side of this. Would Greg have the same success if he had the farm in Iowa and he had to build it from scratch and he had to be a farmer Greg?
No, I don't think
John Deere. Go do some row crops.
Like. I don't think he would be, right? Because you know, I think when you talk about the guys like the Drurys or whatever, it's like, I mean, they know so much about deer behavior and like weather patterns and stuff like that. Like, if you put them on public land year one, I think Greg would win, or Johnny Stewart,
right?
Cody or Dan, or just name any good hunter, you know, or guys who focus on public land. But I think you give the Drurys time, and they would figure it out.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I just think that they're that sharp when it comes to deer hunting.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's behavioral. It's like if you gave Greg the same amount of time to go on and build a farm, I'm sure he could.
Right. Or
but season one versus season one, I think on their home turf, they're probably going to win their own game.
Right. Or if you swap them and gave Drurys a season one on public and let Greg hunt their farm, I think Greg would probably kill the better deer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, but I agree with what you're saying. You know what I mean? It's like they both have a strong suit that fits for what they do. But I think the Drurys would be able to apply it, like guys like that just know hunting and understand deer behavior. Like, you put them anywhere, they'll eventually figure it out, you know, because they'll treat a chunk like it's their own, and that's how they'll break it down.
No doubt.
So, hell yeah.
What do you think?
I think it was a good sesh.
Yeah, we're 2 hours in.
Woo. That might be. How long was the Dan and Stacy one? Was that our longest before that?
It was like 90 minutes. Right, Corey MMA.
Oh, yeah.
I fell asleep during that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually funny. So we recorded that last Saturday, and we're recording this 6-7 days after that. Clint was still here. He was napping on a cot in the corner.
I was. I was also getting sick because Chad fed me raw sausage. So
That is true.
Please refrain.
yeah, sorry. Chad was cooking sausage in the kitchen and undercooked it. I ate it.
Some good old hunting buddies
Got
for
sick.
5 years together.
I think that's a pretty good spot to end this one.
Yeah, that's
Yep. All right. Well, Clint, thank you for hopping on our podcast. You're welcome anytime, and we're really thankful for all the help that you do and the consistency you provide value to the brand. You're always a phone call away for help, so we appreciate that a lot. And if you haven't done so already, or if you've never heard of Clint, I don't know where you're at, but head over to Truth from the Stand on wherever you listen to podcasts. Check them out. Episodes on Wednesdays.
Episodes on Wednesdays, and we also have Skull Brew Coffee Company.
Woo.
Woo. Get yourself some Skull Brew, skullbrewcoffee.com. Support conservation.